Welcome to today's webinar presented by 47Lining and PH Tech. I'd like to introduce 47Lining CEO, Mick Bass. Mick, please take it away.
Thank you, Carla, and thanks everyone for joining today's webinar. I'd like to tell you a bit about 47Lining, about myself, and about our partnership with Amazon Web Services. 47Lining focuses on helping customers to design, prove out, launch, and operate big data solutions in Amazon Web Services. We're an AWS Advanced Consulting Partner with the Big Data Competency designation. This means that our solution architects are trained in each of the underlying AWS Big Data services, including those that we'll be focusing on in today's webinar, most notably Redshift. It also means that when we work with customers like PH Tech, we bring to bear useful patterns to combine those services into repeatable data machines that respond to business-level needs, and that we have a demonstrated track record of customer success throughout this process. We've helped customers to apply big data to a range of business problems, ranging from churn prediction, content recommendations, offer management, Internet of Things backends, and lead scoring, and as we'll discuss today, development of data as a service offerings. Our customers come from multiple verticals, ranging from over-the-top TV everywhere providers to mobile gaming companies to insurance, healthcare, and financial services firms. My role at 47Lining is to lead the team and to ensure that each of our engagements brings an appropriate mix of technology, people, and process into focus to respond to the business objectives that are most critical for our customers. My background spans business, professional services, and managed services delivery with deep technology roots in distributed computing. I'm one of 47Lining's several Amazon Web Services professional-level certified solutions architects. In this webinar, my co-presenter Chad Cassidy and I would like to walk through a representative example of a Redshift Jumpstart customer engagement that we delivered for PH Tech, a healthcare services firm. Chad is the VP of IT at PH Tech. Let's take a moment so Chad can introduce himself and tell us a little bit about PH Tech, their business, and his role.
Good morning. Thanks, Mick. My name is Chad Cassidy. I'm the VP of IT for PH Tech, as Mick said. I've been in the healthcare industry, healthcare technology industry specifically for over 20 years, and I've been with PH Tech for about 16. During that time, we've grown from 5 employees to nearly 280, and I've personally gone from a wearer of many startup hats, from server and database administration to software development, help desk, and even occasionally answering member calls. Today, I'm primarily responsible for the technical product strategy, product roadmap, as well as our software engineering team. PH Tech, which is performance health technology. We build and deliver software and administrative services for health plans and communities to help them manage and control risk, workflow, and population health for their members. Our primary customers are provider and community health plans with Medicaid or Medicare Advantage populations in Oregon and California, and we deliver a full set of tools and services that a community health plan needs to operate effectively, including claims processing, member and provider customer service, community portal, data analytics, member engagement, as well as strategic consulting. Our systems store and process protected health information, which we reference as PHI, for over 1 million enrollees. I'll turn it over to Mick to discuss the agenda.
Thanks, Chad. So today in the webinar, we'd like to frame up for all of you the challenge that PH Tech faced and the opportunity in providing its services and underlying data in a data as a service model to their customers. This represented a significant shift to the way that they had been interacting with customers previously. And as we got to know Chad and his team, we'd also like to frame up the solution that we worked together to develop through the course of this engagement that Chad and PH Tech has now rolled out into production. we're going to speak quite extensively about Amazon Redshift, which is a core component of this solution, but we'll also talk about the whole engagement process, including training of Chad and his team, as well as development of solution architecture, focusing on the engagement outcomes of the POC that de-risk and validate the approach, and then how to support and maintain the implementation over time. And then finally, we'd like to share some of the results and the impact on PHTech's business that resulted from this engagement model and the solution that emerged from it. Just a few housekeeping items. We are going to reserve some time at the end for Q&A, so if you have questions that come up at any point during the presentation, please drop those into the WebEx Q&A panel, and we'll return to those at the end. And we'll also be recording this webinar presentation, and we'll post and make the recorded version of the webinar available to all of the registrants so that you can come back and review for those that were not able to join today. And so we'd like to start with a description of the opportunity and the challenge that PHTech faced in this transition to data as a service. Chad?
Thanks, Mick. So we had a customer approach us and asked us for database administration services. That was not our core competency, so we started asking them questions about what it was that they were trying to accomplish. They wanted a data warehouse system. They were planning to hire FTEs and build their own on-premise system. However, they had limited technology resources and expertise, and so they were looking for some help. Since PHTech provides health plan administration tools and services, they gave us a call and asked us to help them set this up. So they wanted to have a solution, a data warehouse, which stored the PHTech managed data, which is data that we previously were delivering to them in comma-separated value files. And they also wanted to store data of their own custom data, and that could be anywhere from Excel spreadsheets to plain text files. So as we had conversations with them, we opted to offer them an alternative solution, which they hadn't considered, and that's cloud-hosted data warehouse. Ultimately, what we wanted to be able to deliver to them was simply an endpoint, so they didn't have to worry about on-premise systems or staff for managing the system and managing infrastructure. Just an endpoint that they could directly connect using their reporting and analytics software. So in the healthcare industry, HIPAA is the term that's thrown around quite a bit, and within the HIPAA regulations, there are security requirements with regards to protected health information, and that is that we're required to encrypt PHI at all times, at rest and in transit. So we needed to have a solution for them which allowed the data to be encrypted at all times, as well as secured by individual user access. The ease of customer data consumption was their main concern. They used the tool Tableau for reporting, and they wanted to be able to utilize that to connect to a data warehouse. But at the same time, they also wanted the alternative, or excuse me, they wanted to be able to have their preference of another tool if they chose to switch. So we needed to be able to provide them a data warehouse which they were able to use any industry standard tool that they chose to connect to it. So at this, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Mick to talk about how we came to this solution.
You bet. Thanks, Chad. So as I mentioned, one of the key components in the architecture for the underlying solution is an offering from Amazon Web Services called Amazon Redshift. in our early dialogues with Chad and the PH Tech team, it became clear that Redshift was attractive as an underpinning of their data as a service offering because of the HIPAA compliance that Todd mentioned. Amazon Web Services has the ability to enter into what's called a business associate agreement, which describes the scope of the operating services that are covered within the HIPAA certification rules. And so for those of you who are within this industry, it's helpful to understand that Amazon Redshift is covered within that BAA and therefore is a good fit with the data as a service offering that was targeted. Many customers are attracted to Redshift because of the low absolute price as well as really strong price performance, especially as compared to many legacy on-prem data warehouse solutions and offerings. One of the things that was attractive to Chad and the PH Tech team was the ability to scale this solution elastically, both in terms of the volume of data for any particular customer, but also with respect to the onboarding of new customers. So this notion of being able to commission these clusters in response to new business demand and onboarding of new clusters, and to be able to get a new cluster in place for a new customer in a matter of minutes was extremely attractive. And then finally, we always had in mind in the dialogue with PH Tech, not just what does it take to get this launched into the marketplace, but what would the ongoing operations and cost model be over time. And the fact that Amazon Redshift is a hosted managed solution where Amazon Web Services carries a big part of the burden was pretty attractive. It allows the PH Tech team really to focus more on the data value add that they're trying to provide through the data as a service offering, and a little bit less on some of that undifferentiated heavy lifting that comes with setting up new IT environments. So to get started, the way we decided to work together was to walk down the road in what we call a Redshift Jumpstart engagement. And the focus of the engagement was really to kick off this process of introducing a new capability for PH Tech, including the teams within PH Tech that would be supporting it, to ensure that the solution architecture that we deployed and launched into production was correct, supported security best practices, that we had the right DevOps kind of tooling in place so that ongoing operations costs would be optimized over time. And finally, so that we left the PH Tech team with the right set of best practices for system maintenance and keeping the performance of the solution running well over time. These kinds of Jumpstart engagements we find are very valuable to teams who are beginning to adopt Amazon Web Services, because in many cases, as we mentioned, the focus of the team is really on the differentiated strategy of the company, and a lot less on, in many cases, technical underpinnings. And so when introducing a new offering like this, it can really help to accelerate time to market, and it can increase the comfort level as well as the buy-in from the teams who may be, in some cases, learning some new skill sets. So let's go to the next slide, and we'll share a little bit more detail about the essential aspects of the data flow that manifested within the solution that we developed together with Chad and the team. Chad, how about you walk us through it?
Sure. So we have multiple systems that have multiple instances of customer systems, and each customer may have data across more than one system. So our first challenge was to figure out how to extract our data out of those systems, compile it together, and then once again separate it back out by customer. So the just in general here, an overview of the data flow. We're extracting data out of our transactional systems. Well, first we have read replicas. We're doing replication to read replicas. We do extraction from those replicas into S3 buckets, load those into Redshift using data pipeline for orchestration, and compile all of the customer data together. And then we do light transformation and separation of the customer data, drop it to S3 buckets, and load it into individual customer Redshift instances. You want to move on to the next slide there, Carla? So the first step was getting the data out of our system and into S3 buckets. And generally, that's a fairly simple task. We use Attunity for replication to our read replicas. They do have a tool called CloudBeam, which can be used to load data into Redshift, but we wanted to do some transformation, some light transformation on the data first. And so we opted to use a combination of SQL statements using the data pipeline and orchestration tools to extract that data. And as I said, we may have one customer who has data across two of our systems, so we had to compile them all together in order to separate them out. The next step is the transformation process. This was actually the most difficult process for us. Determining the solution for the orchestration was something of a challenge because there are so many different options to use. We have previously used SQL Server integration services. We also tried some form of Lambda for some orchestration assistance. We tried the vendor solution from Attunity, and we ended up settling on data pipeline. And in this particular, this was where we needed the most help from 47Lining, was really determining which of these solutions was going to be the best fit for us. So we had light transformation that was needed. We had a lot of data that we had to pull from read replicas and combine together. And the process of doing this was fairly complex. And so some of the important questions that we had to ask was, how are we going to get the data from multiple systems, combine them together and into a single system? Do we do that inline, or do we do that as part of the Redshift instance itself? So we ended up using Redshift for light transformation. We actually load all the data in sort of a raw format, staging format in the Redshift instance, and from there we create new tables and new schemas after the transformation within that same instance. So we really needed a lot of help in these steps in order to get to the point where we could create the customer databases. The next step was really the easiest part, and that's just loading it into the customer's database, their specific Redshift instance. By the time we got to this step, really all the hard work was complete. We extract the data from our staging Redshift instance, dump it into this S3 bucket that is for this specific customer, and then we load those files directly into the customer's Redshift instance, and we run the nightly performance and maintenance task, vacuum and analyze on it. So the last step is really the delivery of that endpoint to our customer. They wanted to connect using Tableau, so we gave them the connection string. They can use that Tableau or whatever standard BI tool that they choose in order to do that. And because Redshift is generally speaking a tool agnostic solution, they have a lot of flexibility in what they're able to use. So the next step here, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Mick to talk a little bit about the architecture details and the decisions about what resources live where within Redshift, our Redshift solution.
You bet. Thanks, Chad. So that's a great walkthrough of the overall data flow, and you see in the numbered steps on the solution architecture diagram here the sort of sequencing of the data. But another really important part of the overall solution is the construction of the environments in which the Redshift instances would live, establishing all of the right access and roles and identity policies so that different parts of the architecture can access the data, ensuring that things are configured properly for secure communication while data is in transit and encryption for data at rest. And so this picture is really more of an overview of the overall environment within Amazon Web Services that includes the S3 buckets that are used for initial ingest of the data, as well as the post-ELT kind of transformed data that's in normalized customer presentable format. You can also see the notion that there's an environment where multiple Redshift cluster instances can be commissioned on demand. There's the single Redshift instance that's used for the staging transformations that then leads to this publishing process that Chad described to populate Redshift clusters, one per customer for analytics consumption. And then finally, BI tools on the customer side, outside of AWS, are connecting to those provisioned Redshift instances within the cloud. The other thing that you can see in this solution architecture are the key actors during the construction, build, operation of the system that end up interacting with the system. And so in this data as a service solution, as we find is kind of typical in many companies that are looking at this sort of pattern, it's very helpful to take a managed services mindset about what is the service that we're trying to provide to the end customer, who are the providers that are providing the input or the the bill of materials that are required for the manufacturing process to make that ultimate data product, and then who are the folks within the data as a service provider who are accountable in an operations capacity to make sure that that machine keeps running. And so here you see the data providers that are providing the nightly feeds from multiple customers, providing data into the S3 bucket, Chad and his operations team keeping the sewing machine running every night, generating and manufacturing the data that is then available to the data consumer. And thinking about it in this managed service mindset is helpful because it leads to questions like how do we make the new customer data available? What's our plan if there was some issue in data quality in the incoming data that led to some unforeseen problem in manufacturing the revised data? We need to be considering things like how do we roll back to make sure that we've always got the best possible data that we're providing to the end consumer. So the story that Chad described is really a typical one that we see in the market. We call it here a tale of two solutions, where in many cases customers either already have or are contemplating a custom data warehouse that they're building on customer-owned hardware. Sometimes they actually don't have this warehouse, but they feel that they need one, and so they turn to companies like PHTech saying, hey, you're doing lots of other stuff for us, so could you do this as well? And then there's this alternative solution of data as a service, where you've got this relatively new capability in the marketplace to on-demand commission whole new data warehouses that are intended to serve a subset of your aggregate data, one per customer. And so as we take a closer look at each of these, I'd like to hand it back to Chad, and he can describe a little bit more about the journey that he had with his customers as they explore these two options.
Yeah, so in the healthcare space, it's less likely that customers and our partners that we deal with think of cloud solutions as actually an option. They don't necessarily go to that as their first choice. So the choice is generally either on-premise or have somebody else build it and have a standard hosted solution. And so it was a bit of a it took quite a bit of conversation in order to really help our customer understand the benefits of using a cloud solution as opposed to building it themselves. One of the things that, one of the words that is used a lot in the healthcare space when it comes to technology is control. A lot of our customers believe that control means on-premise solution, that they have more control over it. And so part of the education throughout this process is really helping our customers understand that they will actually have more control over the solution in a cloud system. And it sounds contrary to what you might think, but by being able to manage everything about the solution through the creation, the security, whether it's encrypted or not, how it's accessed, who accesses it, the logging, all of that is built in a cloud solution and is intended to give you control. Whereas an on-premise solution, a lot of times, some of those things are overlooked, whether that's monitoring of the system or just basic administration tasks. Some of those things are overlooked because they think it's kind of a set it and forget it thing. So as we built this out, some of the benefits there that's listed on the slide that we had to really help our customer understand was our ability to deliver this on demand, a scalable solution for them, whereas an on-premise solution, it would be a little bit harder to scale quickly. They wanted to have a system which only had their data in it. And so we're able to do that by delivering to them their own personal individual Redshift instance. We also were able to deliver this solution at a very low cost. Their capital upfront cost for building on-premise was very expensive, and the time in order to do that was quite excessive, and we were able to deliver a solution to them much faster. We're able to iterate over the solution more quickly. If they need to scale, we can scale with a simple reboot, essentially, as opposed to going out and buying new system. The onboarding of the customer, getting them on and connected to the instance as we're loading data so that they can begin testing it was very fast. It was very easy for the customer to connect with a familiar tool and not have to worry about everything that's happening in the background. I think the next on a nightly basis. Well, with a data warehouse, it's somewhat challenging to do builds of your data and load the data into it and validate it before a user is accessing it. But using Redshift in the way that we are able to implement it, we can actually build out a whole new data warehouse, verify the integrity of the data, and just simply switch it over and replace the outdated data warehouse with the new one. So that's a lot more challenging in a traditional BI solution where you really have to essentially take down the warehouse, take down the data before you can allow the customer to access it. So this slide shows how, as you're loading the data into the Redshift instance, you load it in, you deliver it to the customer, you can immediately begin building a new data warehouse in order to replace that last one. and you can do it without any impact to the customer's performance and utilization of the warehouse, without any impact to how the customer is accessing the data. The nightly swap, obviously it takes a few minutes. There's some downtime there, but it's far less inconvenient when it's overnight when the customer is not using it. So with that, I can turn it back over to you, Mick.
You bet. If we go to the next slide, you know, really the objective that Chad and I shared as we started working together was making sure that he could deliver a positive experience to his first pilot customer and then scale that out to incremental customers using the on-demand capabilities that we were targeting. You know, the key result, I think, from a business perspective was acceleration in that time to market. Chad, maybe you can describe a little bit about the business outcomes that you've seen as a result of that.
Yeah, for our product results, what we were aiming at and what we achieved was we're able to deliver a data warehouse to our customer using nothing more than just an endpoint, a connection endpoint for them. We have a scalable system. It's easy to control the costs. It integrates with many solutions, whatever solution the customer chooses, and all of it is managed in code. So it's the true infrastructure as code system where we can look at the entire system, look at the entire infrastructure, and throw it away and rebuild it as needed. As far as the project goes, the project results were that we got education and training from the 47Lining team throughout the course of this project. A lot of knowledge transfer occurred during this, and our whole team now has far more tools in our tool belt. Now we know we can, what our capabilities are, what the possibilities are when we're presented with a problem. It also gave us a model for future proof of concept projects. This particular project, we went through this, I think it was over a course of 2 weeks, and from the beginning to the end, we came up with a solution. We tried out several different ways of solving the problem that we were trying to solve, and by the end we had a very clear solution that we were able to build upon moving into the future. So the next slide are some next steps, and I'll hand that back over to Mick.
Thanks, Chad. So the process that Chad described, beginning with a proof of concept to ramp team knowledge, explore alternatives, drive out risk, validate that solutions are workable, validate the ongoing costs that are associated with that solution. We find that this is a really typical pattern in a way that many customers get started with Redshift. We have a phenomenal relationship with the Amazon Web Services team that we'll double click into in a minute. But the proof of concept jumpstart engagements to get your team bootstrapped very quickly on Redshift are very accessible for you and your business. In many cases, the POC leads into discussions of how then will this service be managed and operated over time. And there's two models there. Many companies choose to ramp internal skills and capabilities and manage these services on an ongoing basis on their own. In some cases, they'll request assistance from 47Lining to run these services on their behalf. And then finally, as data and customer volumes grow to be very, very large, in many cases, we'll come back and do some checkpoint kinds of engagements, really to ensure that queries, speeds and feeds continue to be optimized as data sizes grow into the hundreds of millions to billions of rows per day kind of range. Timing for that varies on customer use case, but it's helpful to know that there's an accessible model to ensure that those kinds of services are available to you as you need them. finally, as a specific invitation to a next step, we'd love to offer any of the customers on the phone or any of the viewers of the webinar to give us a call. We'll schedule a free assessment that I think would mirror the initial dialogue that we had together with Chad. You know, customer says, hey, here's the business problem I'm trying to solve, and these are the ideas that I have about tackling that. We talk about the different alternatives and mechanisms within the AWS solution architecture and your existing enterprise installation, the data that you have, the queries that you would intend to run. And we could get a high-level scope for what one of these proof of concept engagements would look like. Based on the support that we have from the Amazon Web Services team for qualified customers who decide to head down this road of the proof of concept engagement, we're able to offer some free service credits for the Amazon services that are involved in that work that are equivalent to 750 free hours of Redshift usage. So it just takes a little bit more risk out for you. If you're interested in scheduling this kind of a conversation, you can go to our Redshift assessment page that you see here and give us some basic information, and we'll get that set up for you. So now we have some time for Q&A. We'd like to open it up. I think that we see some written questions and written answers. So maybe we can share those for the rest of the attendees. The first question that I see is that new requirements regarding cloud service solutions include continuous monitoring, continuous evaluation for security threat prevention. How did you provide this feature?
So I answered that in the Q&A panel. We provide continuous monitoring. Whoops, am I off? No, I'm sorry. I thought I was on mute there for a second. You can hear me, right? Okay,
yes,
good. Okay. So we provide continuous monitoring using a combination of solutions. We have Splunk. We use VictorOps for alerting. We use New Relic and CloudTrail. So it's a combination of those things that we use to monitor all of our applications and solutions. Threat prevention is done through several additional things, including vulnerability audits, assessments at both the application code as well as infrastructure, and we do network testing as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Chad.
I should ask, did that answer your question, Jansen? Okay, good. Thanks.
Perfect. Any other questions from the group?
A pretty quiet group today.
Sure. Well, I would like to encourage everyone to feel free to follow up directly with Chad and with me if you have further questions based on the webinar, the topics that we've discussed. Feel free to head to the Redshift assessment page, and we'll get free assessment rolling for you guys and some AWS service credits to support work together. And we really appreciate you taking the time to learn a bit about this journey and the technology that enabled it and the business results that were possible because of it. Thank you, Chad, for co-presenting, and thanks to everyone from the Amazon team who joined as well to support this effort.
Thank you, everyone.